Shulam Aleichem, everybody. Today's daf is daf Gimel and Horayos. Today's daf is learned Leilu Nishmas, my dear cousin. Nefesh HaYikara, Neshamat HaHoira, Habocher HaChashuv, Yosef Yeshua ben Rebbe Eliezer Friedman, Tehei Nishmasa Yitzrura B'tzur HaChaim. Yesterday we learned in the Mishnah that a Yochid that followed the Psak of Bezdin, of the Sanhedrin Agadol, who paskin the wrong psak, they said chaylev or dam is mutter, and it's a mefurish pasuk. You're not allowed to eat it, but for some reason, somehow, some way, they arrived to a psak that it's mutter, and a yochid followed that psak. The Mishnah said that he's potter from achatas because he's toilo b'das bezdin, because he relied on bezdin. Zog the Gemara, Omer Rav Yehuda, Omer Shmuel, the middle of the Bezim at Bez. Omer Rav Yehuda, Omer Shmuel, Zud Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Our Mishnah is only Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim say, Yochid she'asa b'hiras bezdin chayev. That a Yochid that followed the hiras bezdin, the wrong psak of bezdin, he's chayev. My Rabbi Yehuda, how do we know this is Rabbi Yehuda? Where do you see this Rabbi Yehuda? Tani we learned in the Braisa. Nefesh achas techte b'shgoga v'asoisa. The Torah, when the Torah talks about karbim shoygig, somebody does a shoygig, aveda, then he brings a chatas. So the Torah says, Nefesh achas techte b'shgoga v'asoisa. Ele gimel miyutin. You have three miyutin. First of all, nefesh. Didn't have to say nefesh. Didn't have to say achas. Could have said him techte b'shgaga. And then also didn't have to say ba'sois sa, the hay. Could have said ba'sois. So arei legimel miyutin, which teaches you, the third miyut teaches, oisem epi atzmei chayiv. Somebody does it on his own, he's chayiv. Beiros bezn potter. Ba'sois he has to do it on his own volition. But beiros bezn he's potter. Says the Gemara, my Rabbanon, Gewalt. Ani medaber, ani lomed, zeu, nu, yesha. Yeah? Okay. My Rabbanon, we're up to Bezim at Beis Rav Shol. Shulam Aleichem, Rav Shol. Okay. We're at Bezim at Beis. The Gemara said that the Rabbanon argue on the Mishnah. The Rabbanon argue on our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Yochid. Yochid that followed the wrong psak of Bezdin, he's potter from Echatos, because he's toile b'das Bezdin. The Gemara says, Rabbanon argue, my Rabbanon. Where do you see the Rabbanon argue? The time they went in the Braisa. Adayin ani yoyim miyet kol shechatu. Chayovin she'ein bezdin mavin aidein par. Because bezdin doesn't bring a par elam davar shel tzibur. If only a miyet kol is chatu. Only roiv kol you bring a par. Yeah. But a miyet kol, they don't bring a par. So perhaps I would have said that they don't bring a chatas either. Yeah? Oh, so therefore they bring a chatas. Roiv kol shechatu, but a roiv kol that did a shoygig. Yehei pturin shrei bezdin mavin al yedei par. Perhaps they should be potter because bezdin brings a par helam davar shal tzibur. Talmud loimer me'ama oretz. So the Torah teaches that even a roiv kol shechatu also brings a chatas, even though there is by shigig asayra there is a par helam davar shal tzibur. So the Gemara, what does it teach? It's a fila ruba fila kula. B'mai. Now we want to dissect this brisa. What is this brisa talking about? Yeah, if you didn't get the brisa, the Gemara didn't get the brisa either. Okay, the Gemara is going to ask, b'mai, what are we? These are the words of the brisa, but what's the brisa talking about? Ilema b'shigigas ma'isa shaloi b'hiras bezdin. If you're going to tell me the pasuk, the parsha is talking about, the brisa is talking about only b'shigigas ma'isa. Again, there are two types of shogigin. One is shigigas maisa, and the other is shigigas eira. Shigigas maisa means a guy makes a mistake. He grabs shuman, or he thinks he grabs shuman, and he grabs the chaylev instead, or he didn't know that chaylev is aser. However, he made that shogig. That's called the shigigas maisa. Then there's shigigas. Ken, shigigas maisa, you got to bring a chatas. Shigigas eira is a whole different parsha. Shigigas eira means I knew it's aser, I knew this is chaylev, but I followed Bezdin's psak. Bezdin said it's mutter. Two parshas of shoygig. Shigigas eira and shigigas maisa. Now, says the Gemara, what kind of shoygig is the brisa discussing? Ilema b'shigigas maisa shaloi b'hiras bezdin. If you're going to tell me we're talking about a shigigas maisa and there's no hiras bezdin b'chlal, asks the Gemara, bezdin maya v'detayu. Yeah? What's bezdin doing in the brisa then? Shaloi b'hiras bezdin mi maisa shaloi b'hira. If it's Bezdin brings Shaloi Beiro, Avad they don't bring. So what's the brisa including? What's the brisa in interrupting with Bezdin here. If we're talking about Shigas Maisa, again, Shigas Maisa has nothing to do with Bezdin. If a guy makes a mistake on his own, he thinks Chaylev is mutter, bring a chatos. So why is the Bryce sticking in a Shigas Bezdin, Shigas Ira? So the Gemara says Elo Ba'ira. So if the Bryce is taking a Shigas Ira, must be we're talking about Ira. V'hakiksiv. Very good. Gemara is going to talk about the Bryce's step. Miyut and Roiv. What's the difference? Miyut and Roiv. Yeah, there's a difference. Gemara says. Roiv mamish. Correct. So Gemara says, but first we're trying to establish what kind of shogig we're talking about. We're talking about shogig maisa, nothing to do with Bezdin, or shogig asira, Bezdin misled them. What kind of shogig? Gemara says it can't be talking about just the shogig asmaisa because the Brisa mentions shogig asira. Elo must be bahira. Must be talking about also shogig asira. Asks the Gemara, that can't be either. Because v'achiksiv me'am ha'oretz, when the Torah writes me'am ha'oretz, b'shogig asmaisa v'dechsiv. We're talking about a Shigas Maisa. The Torah's parish is talking about Shigas Maisa. Elo lav hachi ka'amar. Must be we're saying as follows. The Gemara is going to interpret the Brisa. So lo yichol liyot שהברייסה רק מדבר על Shigas Maisa, ולא יכול להיות שהברייסה מדבר רק על Shigas Eira. אז מה הברייסה מדבר בדיוק? What's the case the Brisa is talking about? Says the Gemara, Elo, you know what the Brisa is talking about? Elo, we're talking about lav hachi ka'amar. Miyut kol Shechotu b'shigigas maisa. If you have a miyat kol that sinned b'shigigas maisa, chayovin. They're chayev. You know why they're chayev? She'ein bezdin meviyin al yedeyin par b'hira. Okay, again, you have to keep track, okay? It's a hard Gemara, but it's very easy once you get it outside. There's one track that's called shigigas maisa. There's another track that's called shigigas eira. Okay? Gemara is trying to figure out, how do we know that when a miyat kohol or a roiv kohol does a maisa b'shogig on their own, how do we know they bring a chatos? The pasuk says, "Im nefesh achas techte b'shgaga." One person who does a shogig brings a chatos. Good evening, doctor. How do we know that if it's miyat kohol or roiv kohol, how do we know that they also bring a chatos? Maybe they don't. Says the Gemara, for a davar pashat, a miyat kol for sure brings a chatas. Even though it says nefesh achas, even a miyat kol who is b'shoigig, whatever they think themselves. Lama? Because if you look at shigig asira, what's shigig asira? A different case. Shigig asira by miyat kol, they for sure, there's no parallel in davar shel tzibur by a bezdin, which means they don't have the kula. Which means hen chayovin, they themselves have to bring a chatos. So just like by Shigas Eira, a miyat kol has to bring a chatos, so too by Shigas Maisa, when Bezdin is not involved, they did it on their own, they made their own mistake, they have to bring a chatos. Ze pashut. Just like, right, that's what the Bryce is saying in the first step. Miyat kol. Ken, nachon. Shama hen lo yasu klum. They want very good. Miyat kol shechotu b'shigas Maisa. Chayovin, if the kol miyat kol did a ma'aseh b'shoigig on their own, avad each one is chayav chatas. You know why? Because if you look at shigig asayra, a parallel case, ein bez mavin al dein par b'ira, because Bezdin doesn't bring a parallel davar shel tzibur by a miyat kol by shigig asayra. Hohen chayovin, in that case they have to bring a chatas. So b'meila, so they have to bring a chatas also by shigig asmaisa. Yochel, now the Brisa goes, that's a davar pashat. Now comes the chiddush. Yochel roiv tzibur, so according to this, I would think if roiv tzibur she'osu b'shigigas maisa, I would think that if roiv tzibur did a shigigas maisa, you pturin. Right? If roiv tzibur, let's say roiv klal Yisrael, somehow, some way, they ate chaylev instead of shuman. Without a ros bezdin. I would think, Yupturin, maybe the parsha of Chatos doesn't apply to them. You know why? Sha'arei bezdin meiviin aleim par boira. Because a parallel case in Shigas Eira, Bezdin takes care of the kapara. They're the ones who bring a parallel tzibur. So if you find that Roiv Kol doesn't bring a Chatos by Shigas Eira when Bezdin is toya, perhaps even when Bezdin is not toya, they themselves made the mistake. By Shigas Maisa, they also don't bring a Chatos. And the Parsha doesn't include them. Says the Gemara, Talmud loymar me'ama oretz. Afilu ruboy. Even ruboy, meaning Rav Klal Yisrael Kuloi, they also bring a chatos by shigigas ma'isa. They all have to bring a chatos. So now, what do you see from here? So from this brisa, this whole brisa is brought for one reason and one reason only right now. To show you that the Gemara assumes, this brisa assumes as a davar pashut, that miyat kol by shigigas eira brings a chatos. That's the basis of the brisa. A miyat kol for sure brings a chatos by shigigas ma'isa. Lama? Shebeshigigas eira, Bezin doesn't bring a parel and davar shel tzibur, hen chayaven. They're the ones who bring it. So just like they bring it by shigigas eira, they bring it by shigigas ma'isa. So what do you see from here? That this brisa learns that by shigigas eira, miyat kol brings a chatos. Ze shalok divrei Mishnah. Our Mishnah says yochid she'osa, because Bezin made a mistake. He was toile b'das Bezin, he's potter. This brisa seems to assume as a davar pashut that miyat kol is chayiv when they follow das Bezdin. No, so shigas mais has nothing to do with Bezdin. Shigas mais means I myself, I made a mistake. Yochid or miyat or roiv, there are different levels, right? So the Gemara says, when we talk about a korban chatos in the Torah, if a guy makes a mistake, nothing to do with Bezdin. It says, "V'nefesh achas techta b'shgogo ba'asoisa achas memitzvahs Hashem asher lo yisasan." Right? V'oshet. So we're talking about one person. How do we know that, let's say, miyat kol brings a chatas? Let's say 30 people made the same mistake. They all have to bring a chatas?
Why would have the Havman to think that they don't?
Oh, says the Gemara, there's no Havman that they don't. The Gemara is explaining. Bryce says, you know why they don't? You know why they do? Because by shigigas eira they do. But let's say it's not their mistake. Let's say it's Bezdin's mistake. Yeah. Bezdin doesn't bring a parallel and davar shel tzibur in such a case. They have to bring it. So just like by shigigas eira, Bezdin doesn't bring a parallel and davar shel tzibur to cover them. They have to bring it themselves. Shigigas ma'isa, they also have to bring it.
So how does the Gemara make a step from Raw to Maisa?
Gemara is just proving from eira that if they're chayiv and their own chatas by eira, when a miyat kol violates based on Bezdin and aveda, they are chayiv to bring a chatas on their own. Certainly, when Bezdin is not involved, they do it on their own. They certainly have to bring a chatas.
Like you're making a step from Raw to Maisa.
Yeah, from eira. How do you know by eira? You're saying.
Yeah.
That's Rav Papa's next question. You mecham to the Gemara's question. Okay. How do we know by eira? That's the huguf akasha. That's what you're asking. Yeah. Oh, says the Gemara. Omar Rav Papa. So Rav Papa asked. It's like 10 lines in the bottom. Omar Rav Papa memai dilma maybe loy hen veloy bezdin. How do you know to assume that by shigigas eira they bring a chatas on their own? Maybe by shigigas eira loy hen veloy bezdin. They don't bring a chatas. So the Gemara says, Yachi, my area tekemahadir al ruba l'chiyuva lav mechlal demiyad ba'ira kaimale demechayve ba'ira. Now the Gemara is going to say like this: how do I know that when the brisa discusses shigigas eira by a miyat kol, that the miyat kol brings a chatas? How do I know that? How do you know to assume that in the brisa? How the brisa knows is a different conversation. But how do we know to assume that in the brisa? The brisa doesn't say it in the Mefurish. How do we know to?
Why does the Brisa have to say it all together?
Well, the brisa is trying to prove that b'shigigas ma'isa miyat kol brings a chatas.
But why you have, because we know every Yachid brings a call when
Yeah.
they do Shogeg. So just the miyut, what's the difference between the miyut?
Because the Torah says nefesh achas techta b'shgoga. One.
So the achas.
Ba'asoisa. Yeah, l'chayda, for the Torah emphasizing achas, how do we know if it's a rabbim, but it's still miyat klal yisrael? It's a rabbim. How do we know the ring of chatas? Says the Gemara, I'll tell you. Brisa says, because you see by shigigas eira, Bezin doesn't bring a parallel and davar shel tzibur. So you see, they don't have that kula. Must be hen chayaven over there. So hen chayaven over here too. That's how the Gemara. So the Gemara, so Rav Papa says, not so fast. Mimai, dilma loy hen v'loy Bezdin. Maybe b'shigigas eira, neither one brings a carbon. Not them and not Bezdin. Parallel and davar shel tzibur. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. You know why? I'm going to explain it outside and then I'll read it inside. Okay, very pashut. Gemara says like this. Gemara says, it must be that the Brisa assumed as a davar pashut that by shigigas eira, a miyat kol brings a chatas. How do I see that in the Brisa? Because the Brisa is only searching for the makar for roiv kol. Why Roif Kol? Why not? Why isn't the Brisa searching for a makar that Bashigas Maisa Miyat Kol brings a chatas? For that, the Brisa seems, that's a dover pashut. But only Roif Kol. How do we know Roif Kol? Why should Roif Kol be different than a Miyat Kol? Aha, you know what the difference is? The difference is that by a Miyat Kol, they bring a chatas themselves. By Roif Kol, they don't bring a chatas, so perhaps they don't bring a chatas by Shigas Maisa either. Yeah?
So it's like back and forth.
Yeah, it's an inference from the way the Brisa is searching only by Roiv Kol. How do we know Roiv Kol brings a chatas b'shigas ma'isa? It sounds like the Brisa held as a davar pashut that Miyat Kol for sure brings a chatas. How did the Brisa know to separate and differentiate between Miyat Kol and Roiv Kol? You know why? Because there's a differentiation by shigigas eirah. Because by shigigas eirah, Miyat Kol brings a chatas, and by Roiv Kol they don't bring a chatas. So perhaps the Brisa wants to say parallel to that, shigigas ma'isa would have the same chiluk.
The achas, though, you emphasize the achas.
Right. So, and yet, the Brisa says Hagamet says achas. It's simpler to understand Miyat Kol than Roiv Kol. Roiv Kol is the bigger chiddush. Miyat Kol is still more of a davar pashut. Why is it more of a davar pashut? Because when you look at Shigigas Eirah, must be the Brisa. They bring a chatas, so why should this be different? Oh, so you see clearly from the way the Brisa structures what's the biggest chiddush and what's not a chiddush. You see clearly that the Brisa held there was a difference between a Miyat Kol and a Roiv Kol. Shigas Eirah, Miyat Kol, pashut that brings a chatas, and Roiv Kol it doesn't. So that's how the Gemara understood from the Brisa that it argues in our Mishnah. Because our Mishnah says Yochid, who follows Beznes Potter, and our Brisa seems to assume as a Dover Pashut that a Miyat Kol, which is a Yochid, right, including a Yochid, but even a Miyat Kol brings a Chatas on their own if they followed Bezdin. So this is the Cheshbon of our Gemara. Not an easy Cheshbon. It's a lo davar kal. Lo b'chalal lo. It took me a long time to understand this. But if you understand it outside, the inside will flow very, very pashut. And then we'll get to a little bit of an easier Gemara. Okay. The Gemara says, Rav Papa wanted to say, how do you know the Brisa assumes by Shigigas Eirah they bring a chatas, but Bezin doesn't bring a param davar shel tzibur? Maybe they themselves don't bring a chatas either. Says the Gemara, why is the Brisa putting Roiv as the big chiddush and trying to figure out why they're mechuyev? If the Brisa is putting that as the big chiddush, lav mechlal demid bayra kaim le demechayve bayra. Must be the Brisa assumes the dover pashut that Shigigas Eirah by a miyut is pashut they're mechuyev in a chatas, right? And according to you, that it's not like that. That would have to be v'nehad bereisha al miyuta the mechayev b'shigigas ma'isa. First, you'd have to look for a makar. How do we know by a miyat called the mechuyev b'shigigas ma'isa? Ul b'soif nihadir al ruba l'chiyuva b'shigigas ma'isa. Only afterwards can you get to roiv. El olav medeloy ma'adir al miyat b'chayim b'shigigas ma'isa. Ul b'soif ma'adir ruba l'chayim b'shigigas ma'isa. Shmamen al miyat b'yro chayovin akiz b'sira v'shloi b'shigigas ma'isa chayovin. So from the fact that the Brisa seems to say it's a davar pashut by miyat kol shigas ro der chayiv and achatas, right? And it's different than roiv. Roiv is the bigger chiddush. Must be it's pashut that by miyat kol shigas ro you take a chayiv achatas, and that's how I know shigas ma'asir chayiv. Okay, not an easy gemara, not an easy read either. But Horayos, I realized by Horayos one of the chilukim Horayos has, besides the fact that it's a small Masechta, it has Rashi on both sides, and it's dense, right? It's also not easy to read. The letters are, the font is much smaller. It's also not easy. Sometimes the Gemara doesn't flow as easy as other Masechtas. But now we're up to 2 lines at the bottom. Nichdi. No. Now 2 lines at the bottom. Nichdi. Tavayu stamatanan. Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who agrees with our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda is our Mishnah, and the Brisa argues the Brisa is the Rabbanan. Asks the Gemara, Michdi Tarvayu Stamatanan. There are no names in the Brisas. So, Mimai de Kamais Rabbi Yehuda Basrais Rabbanan, how do you know the first Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda and the second one is the Rabbanan? Maybe say the opposite. Man Shamas le the Dorish Miyuta. Answers the Gemara, I'll tell you why I assume the first Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda. Because Man Shamas le Dorish Miyuta Kai Gavna. Who's the one we find in Shas darshans these kinds of miyutim that are mentioned in the first brisa. Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda Omer, zois toiras ha'oila, he ha'oila, right? Amoik da mizbeach, right? Right? Yeah. Arei elu shloisha miyutin. In this pasuk, there are three miyutin. Yeah, one is zois, and one is he, and one is ha'oila. Ha'oila, the heya yedua. And Rashi says these three miyutim, they teach you different halachas. But al kol panim, this is echoing the other brisa that says nefesh achas techte b'shgog v'asois arei elu shloisha miyutin. Who's the one who says, darshan psukim in this way? You see, it's Rabbi Yehuda. So you can assume that the other brisa is also Rabbi Yehuda. Second line, Gimel Amid Aleph. Okay. Says the Gemara V'i by Seima. Another reason why the second brisa cannot be Rabbi Yehuda. V'i by Seima adayin ani oimer leimotzes mokos like Rabbi Yehuda. I'll tell you why. It's impossible that the second brisa that says that Yochid that followed Bezdin is still Mechuyev Achatas. How do I know it's not Rabbi Yehuda? Because Diktoni, because the brisa there says Roiv Kol Shechatu Bezdin Mavin Al Yidei Par. It's a big shaila. Who brings the Par Helam Davar Shal Tzibur? Yeah? Is it Bezdin? Bezdin themselves bring it?
Yes.
Or is it Am Yisrael? Who's the one who's Mechuyev? Al mi lahavi et apar? Al Bezdin or Am Yisrael? It's big machlokas tanoim. Oh, big machlokas tanoim. Because the brisa says, Roiv kol shechatu bezdin mevin al yedei par. V'hi Rabbi Yehuda, but if it's Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amar tzibur the ma'isa. He says, it's not bezdin, bezdin loy. The Tanan, where do I see that? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shiva Shvatim shechatu. If you have 7 Shvatim of Klal Yisrael that made, it's Roiv. That's called Roiv. Mevin Zayin Porim. Each Shevet is called the call. Each Shevet is called the call. Each Shevet has to bring their own part. So what do you see from here? Rabbi Yehuda says, "Zelo mutal al Sanhedrin gedola." If ze mutal al Sanhedrin gedola, is only one. But if it's on each Shevet separately, that means that Rabbi Yehuda understood that the chiv of parel and shel tzibur lies in the call in each Shevet separately. Okay, so far, up until this point, the Gemara says our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim argue, and he said it b'shem Shmuel. That was which Amoyre b'shem Shmuel. That was Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Now the Gemara says Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Zu Divri Rabbi Meir. Rav Nachman says our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Aval Chachamim oimrim Yochid she'oso b'yiros bezdin chayiv. Our Mishnah argues and says a Yochid that follows bezdin, he's still chayiv achatas. My Reb Meir, my Rabbanan. Where do you see Reb Meir and Rabbanan? How do you know there's a machlokas tanoim arguing about this point? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Hoyru va'osu bezdin paskind chelev is mutter. Let's say va'osu, and they did it. Rabbi Meir poiter v'chama mechayven. Man osu, asked the Gemara. Who's the one that was osu in this brisa? Ilema bezdin. If you're going to tell me bezdin themselves followed their own wrong advice, my time with Rabbanan the mechayvi. Why would the Rabbanan say that they're mechuyev parel and davar shal tzibur? V'atanya yochel hoyru bezdin v'osu bezdin yochel yuchayavin. I would have thought that if bezdin paskins chelev is mutter, and they themselves, they're the only ones who follow their psak halacha, I would have thought they're chayiv parel and davar shal tzibur. Talmud loimer hakol va'asu ma'isa toli bekol ve'irot luya bebezdin. The only time Bezdin brings a parel and davar shal tzibur is if they paskin shaloi halacha and the call follows. So if you're learning that also in this brisa is only Bezdin did their own aveda, then they wouldn't be mechuyev parel and davar shal tzibur l'kul alma. So that can't be the case. So what is the case? Elo hayru Bezdin va'asu roiv kol. Must be that Avad the Roiv Kol followed their wrong psak. So if that's really the case, my time with Reb Meir the Pater. Why would Reb Meir pater in such a case? Everybody agrees that Hoyru Bezdin Paskin Shaloi Ka'alocha and Roiv Kol follows. Certainly, everybody agrees. Yechai the Parel Nover Shal Tzibur. Nobody argues on that. Elolav must be from the fact you see there's a machloikus in the brisa. Must be we're talking about a case of Hoyru Bezdin va'osu miyat kol. Nachnu medabrim on the case of our Mishnah, where Bezdin Paskins Chelev is mutter, And Miyat Kol follows their advice, their psak halacha. Uba haka miflagi. And the machloikas is exactly this. Mar sover yochid she'osa b'yiraz bezdin potter. The Reb Meir holds like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir that says a single person who follows Hayraz Bezdin, he's potter. Umar sover yochid she'osa b'yiraz bezdin chayiv. And the Chachamim will say is chayiv. Argue in our Mishnah. And Mela, you have our Mishnah is subject to a machloikis Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Reb Meir holds yochid she'osa b'yiraz bezdin is potter, and this is our Mishnah, and the Chachamim hold is chayiv. Rechav, you have a Gemara right here. Right here. It's all there.
Thank you. I was wondering I couldn't find the place.
What Gemara did you have?
What is our?
Okay. All right. We're up to Gimel Amud Aleph Amud Av Papa. So now the Gemara wants to suggest that the Brisa, the Machloikas Reb Meir and the Chacham, whether Mechuyev or Potter, is talking about a case of Yochid She'asa B'Ras Bezdin, and that's why it's a Machloikas. Machloikas Tanaim. Our Mishnah is subject to Machloikas Tanaim. Amud Av Papa Loi. The Kula Alma Yochid She'asa B'Ras Bezdin Potter. Al Talba Machloikas B'Yisroel. Yeah? It's amazing. You know why we say Rav Papa and his kids, right, at the end of a Masechta? Because in 10 places, his 10 sons were a zechus, they were a reward for him saying, Elu ve'elu divrei loy pligi. Yeah, they're not arguing. 10 times in Shas. Lamaisa, he doesn't say it before Shavir. He says, the kula alma loy pligi. You don't have to make a machlokas about our Mishnah. You don't have to subject it to machlokas Rebbein and the Chachamim. Either Bryce said it's a machlokas Rebbein and the Chachamim. They're not talking about this case, Bachlal. This case is not a machlokas. So what are they talking about? Elo, the kula alma yochid shas bezdin potter. So what are Rameir and Chachamim arguing about? Elo bezdin mashnam l'roiv tzibur kamiflagi. They're arguing in a whole different case. Yeah? We know that in order for Bezdin to be mechuyev a parallel and davar shel tzibur, you have to have a roiv kohal violate this Issa Torah based on their psak.
If it's a miyut, they don't. If
They
it's
don't.
Right.
And if it's chatzi, they don't either.
Yeah.
So what happens if chatzi call or even a miyat call, your mom is short a few people.
Yeah.
You were short 70 people to be exact, to make it roiv.
Right.
So you have a miyat call followed Bezna Godul's psak halacha, wrong psak. So you don't have a roiv. But if you include Bezdin themselves, right, then you have a roiv. Can you be mashal? Can Bezdin be mashal l'roiv tzibur? Can they tip the scale l'roiv tzibur? Excellent lashon.
They give the psak.
Oh, they gave the psak. Yes.
So why not?
Oh, says Gemara says, Zokt Rav Papa. This is the machloikis Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Ela Bezdin mashal l'roiv tzibur kemiflagi. Mav savar Bezdin mashal l'roiv tzibur. Oh, Rabbi Meir holds. The Chachamim hold Bezdin mashal l'roiv tzibur and Yechayev. And Marsa ain't Bezdin mashal l'roiv tzibur, and that's why you're potter, because you only have a miyot. V'yiboy seima hoyer Bezdin v'asir ruba shall call. And another, we're up to the Gimel and Aleph in the middle. V'yiboy seima shulam aleichem. V'yiboy seima hoyer Bezdin v'asir ruba shall call. Man Chacham Reb Shimoni the Omer Tzibur Maisi or Bezdin Maisi. You have one opinion. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that when Bezdin Paskins Chelev is mutter, let's say, and Roiv Klal Yisrael follows their psak, the halach is Bezdin has to bring a parallel and davar shel tzibur. But it's not to say that now Klal Yisrael is potter from their own chatas. Bezdin Maisi, the Tzibur Maisi. Each one has to bring a karvin. It's not to say that you're potter because Bezdin has you covered because it was their mistake. You followed. Oh, okay, my mistake. It says Reb Shimon Stam. It's a brisa. Pashtus Reb Shimon Stam in a Tana is also Reb Meir and Reb Shimon are bar pluktus. Reb Meir is the one who argues on him. So I would assume it's Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. They're both talmidim of. Okay, but either way, Man Cham Reb Shimon the Omer Tzibur Maisi Bezdin Maisi, and the machlokas is whether we're not talking about parallel and davar at all. Everybody agrees parallel and davar is broad over here because it's Ruba Shal Kol. The shaila is whether the tzibur still has to bring a chatas in addition to parallel and davar shal tzibur of Bezdin. A third option in how to interpret the machlokas Reb Meir and the Chachamim is sheved she'oso b'roas bezdinoi. What if you have an entire shevet that followed their, I guess, state judiciary, right? If they followed their state or their hiraz bezdin, they each have a bezdin. Shoiftim v'shoitrim titim l'cho b'chol shorecha lishvatecha. Right? Each shevet had.
Each
Each Shevet had. So what if
the Bezdin
of the Shevet, Paskin,
the
Chaylev is mutter?
the Bezdin Gadol of each Shevet
Yeah.
is basically meshubed to the Bezdin Gadol in Yerushalayim.
Okay, but Bezdin Gadol Yerushalayim didn't comment. It didn't come to the Supreme Court. It was on the state level.
How could
It
they
was
do
Shevet.
that? Something like that. How could they do that?
They can do it. They paskin the Chaylev is mutter for their Shevet. So that's what happened.
Yeah.
So the Gemara says, so Oy Bazoi, it's a machloikus. If an entire Shevet followed their stage of issue, I'm just saying, so calling it that.
Right.
Also Beiroz Bezdinoi, Oyse a Shevet Chayev, and that's the machloikus that made the Rameh says Potter, Chamim say Chayev. V'yiboy Seimu, another option how to interpret that machloikus, Ken Shechatu Shisha, Ve'in Ruboy Shal Kol Sheva, Af B'Shein Ruboy Shal Kol. You have two ways in how to measure Roiv. Roiv Shvatim, but that's not the popular vote. That's not a majority of the popular vote. It's only the electoral college, so to speak. It's Roiv Shvatim. Yeah, you're not just because you have Roiv Shvatim doesn't mean you have Roiv Kol, Roiv Klal Yisrael. There's smaller Shvatim and larger Shvatim. So either or would constitute a Roiv to be Mechayev Sanhedrin HaGadol and a parallel Davar Shal Tzibur. That's what the Machloikas is. Can you have either? Yeah, Kagon Shechatu Shishav and Rubesh Shal Kol, a Miyat Shvatim, but those Miyat Shvatim constitute Roiv Klal Yisrael, or Shiva, or a majority of the Shvatim, Alpha Pi She'ein and Rubesh Shal Kol, even though they don't constitute Roiv of Klal Yisrael. And Masniz Mani, Reb Shimon ben Elazari, the time Shimon ben Elazari, Aimer Meshmoi, Chatu Shiva and Rubesh Shal Kol, Shiva Alpha and Rubesh Shal Kol, Chayavin. Okay, so that's another option of the Machlokes. Omer of Asi, it's unbelievable Gemara. I saw some people on their status. You know, El Stefanski's shir, because he gives a shir 7 o'clock in the morning. So I saw a guy I know, right? On his status, he posted this Gemara. He lives in Ramat Bechanish, an American, made an Aliyah, and he says, take a look at the Gemara he's about to say. Omer Ravasi, Ubohira Halech Achar Roishve Roiv Yoishve Eretz Yisrael. First wide line, Gimel Omer Aleph. That when you measure Roiv Klal Yisrael versus Miyat, if you have a Roiv Klal Yisrael that followed Bezin's psak, and to be Mechayev Bezin, Parallel Davar Shal Tzibur, the Yidden in Chutz La'aretz are not counted. Only Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. Shenema, Vayas Shloime Be'esa Hi Asachag, V'chol Yisrael Imoy, Kohol Godoil, a majority, Milevoy Chamos, Ad Nachal Mitzrayim, Lefnei Hashem Lekenu, Shivas Yom, Abos Yom, 14 days they celebrated. Okay. Mirdi Chsiv Chol Yisrael Imoy Kol Godel Mulvechem Zaram Nachal says Kol Yisrael Imoy. So why did the rest Kol Godel with all the boundaries Mulvechem Nachal Mitzrayim? Shma Mino Hani Yehuda Ikar Kol. The pasuk is emphasizing those boundaries to tell you that only people who live within those boundaries, within Eretz Yisrael, is called a Kol. Avlahanach, but anybody else who doesn't live within the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, Loi Ikri Kol, is not called a chelik of Kol. It's not called a Kol. Okay.
Fuel for the Mishloach.
Fuel. Okay. Okay, we're a lot to talk about over here. But you could see that the font is smaller over here in Horayos, so we got to move on because we got to pack it in. So what is it? Pshita. Okay, now we talk about Roiv. Pshita merubin v'nesmatu. What if you had a Roiv who followed Bezin's wrong psak, and then they became a miyat? How did they become a miyat? Corona. Some Magefa spread, and a lot of those people who followed Bezin died, and now as you come to bring the Karban, you count again, and they constitute a miyat of Klal Yisrael. So do you go Basar Shas Chet, B'Shas Davera, it was Roiv, right? Or Shas Yediyah, when they realized that they made a mistake and Bezin had a recall, now they're at this point they're a miyut.
This is the kind of machloket that's all through Shas.
Oh, so the Gemara, Hainu plukta de Reb Shimon v'Rabbanon. This is a machlokes Reb Shimon v'Rabbanon. We'll see Be'ezras Hashem in the second perik, a machlokes Reb Shimon v'Rabbanon in a different context, which is a nasi or a kohen meshuach who does an avera. He brings a par. He doesn't bring a kispa or seir. He doesn't bring the same korban. So the whole shaila over there, if let's say he did the avera, b'shoigig when he was still a hedyot, and then his status changed. He became a nasi, became a kohen meshuach, and then after he became a nasi kohen meshuach, he realized that what he did when he was a hedyot was wrong. So which korban does he bring? Kishas achet or kishas yediyah? Kishas Yediyah, he's a koyin b'shuach adaranosi. Kishas achet, he's a hedyet. So heichel daini lahaydina. How do we judge this? What kind of carbon does he bring? Machloikis, Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. Machloikis Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan. So Rabbi Shimon says that kishas.
You're the first widest line, or what?
Kishas Yediyah. So we are 4 wide lines from the wide lines. Okay. The Gemara says, Hainu plukta de Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. That's really machlokes Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. That again, over here, you have a roiv b'shas achet, you have a miyat b'shas Yediyah. So which one is it? So that's really machlokes Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. By koyin v'shuach and a nasi. Right? He made the chet when he's a hedyet. Shas Yediyah is when he's a koyin v'shuach and a nasi. So here you have machlokes Rabbi Rabbanan. What happens? What happens the other way around? They did the chet when they were a miyut. And then, b'shas Yediyah, they were nisrabu. Now, I don't know how they became nisrabu b'shas Yediyah. Let's say everybody gave birth to twins. I'm not sure, but okay. No, it's not gonna constitute it because.
My brother get.
Huh?
My brother get twins today.
Mazel
Mazel
tov.
tov.
See that? Look at that. Mazel tov. No, it's not gonna make it the roiv. But with regard to this, it's not gonna make it the roiv. Because we're talking about roiv who did the aveira. So how does a miyah turn into a roiv who did the aveira? How does that happen? And the answer is, you know how? The people who didn't do it died. A lot of the people died, and now when you come to measure, now they're the roiv.
It's the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. So now the shaila is, how do you judge this case? Is it also subject to the machlokes of Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan, or maybe not? The Gemara wants to know, is that the same machlokes or not?
אבל זה קרה פתאום, אבל בהתחלה זה לא דומה, אתה לא יכול, זה לא קרה באותו זמן. זאת אומרת, פתאום התנאים השתנו.
כן, פתאום, yeah. The Gemara is going to say, excellent. Yeah. So the Gemara says, Mu'otem v'escha b'umai, mi pligi Reb Shimon v'Rabbanan, Reb Shimon de Ozl b'as Yediyah mechayev, v'Rabbanan de Ozl b'as echatos patri, because at that point they were a miyat, or maybe not. That's the shaila. So, mai. So the Gemara says, Tizbara. When do we say? When does Reb Shimon say you go basir yediyah? When the chet and the yediyah were both bechiyuv, right? Koyin meshuach and a nasi. When he's chayte, he's chayav a carbon. Question is what kind of carbon? He's definitely chayav a carbon, right? So there. Question is, what kind of carbon you go basir yediyah? But the chet and the yediyah was bechiyuv. You're definitely chayav a carbon. But yediyah deloy chata mishameslei. How could you apply that opinion of Reb Shimon to this case? Because here,
It happened a year ago.
if they were a
whatever it was.
miyut b'shas the chet, they weren't even mechuy the carbon,
Yeah.
right? They weren't even mechuy b'adosh davar. Yeah, they came like Ashkel. Reb Shimon chatav yediyah baye. So Reb Shimon can't compare that. Reb Shimon is chatav yediyah baye needs both. In order to go basir yediyah, you need that the chet and the yediyah happen b'shas chiyuv. Okay, that's that. Ibayelahu zug the Gemara a shaila as follows. Okay, a couple of interesting shaylas. Hoyru bezdin chaylev mutter v'osu miyat akol. So first bezdin paskins by mistake chaylev is mutter, and miyat klal yisrael follow. V'chazru bezdin. Now there was a recall. Bezdin realized, oy we made a mistake,
Yeah.
and then they made the mistake again. V'hoyru. Now don't tell me exactly how this happened. Ich weiß nicht. I don't know details.
What they said.
But
No,
what happened
it's-
was they
it's also, and then he said it's mutter, and then-
paskin by mistake.
That it was mutter.
Chaylev is mutter. Miyat kol followed.
Right.
Then they retracted.
Wait, it's mutter.
Wait, it's usher.
Right.
Now they paskined again.
That it's
Chaylev
mutter.
is mutter, and a different miyat call followed.
Yeah.
When you combine the miyat plus the miyat, you have a roiv. Yeah. So do they bring a parallel on Dover Shal Tzibur or not? That's the shaila. Okay. Boilu. Hoyru bezdin chaylev mutter v'osu miyat hakol v'chazru bezdin behen, and bezdin was chayzer on the psak v'hoyru, and then they paskined it again. V'osu miyat acher, and a different miyat said did the same mistake based on bezdin's psak. And when you combine the two miyutim, you have a roiv. So Mao, what's the halacha? Kiven the shtei yediyas ninu. Since the two yediyas came as a result of two different psakim, loy mitztarif. You can't be mitztarif, and Bezdin doesn't bring a parallel davar shel tzibur. Oidel mekiven the idu v'idi chaylevu. At the end of the day, it's the same psak halacha. Bezdin paskin chaylev is mutter, and they both ate chaylev, both miyutim chaylev. Maybe it's mitzdarif, and now they have to bring a parallel shatzibor. The imtem tzolai bekiven the ida the chaylev mitzdarif, and if you're going to say in this case it's mitzdarif, says the Gemara a bit more creative. What about like this? Miyad bechaylev shal gabe akeva, and miyad bechaylev shal gabe daken mahu. What happens if the two miyutim ate different parts of the animal? They made us. They followed Bezdin's psak on the miyat on the chaylev shal gabe akeva, and the others followed Bezdin's psak on the chaylev shal gabe daken. So now you have another separation between them. It's not just two separate psakim. It's not just two separate miyutim. It's also two separate chaylevs. Can you be mitzvah of that? That's the shaila.
But the Isser is the same on each type.
Mao. Right. Since the Isser is the same, hachavadei kiven de betrei kroi kaasi loy mitzdarif. I don't know kiven the chaylevu. It's the same shem chaylev, shem Isser chaylev, like you're saying. Maybe it's mitzdarif. V'imtim tzvam shem chaylevu mitzdarif, like Rabbi Yoel just said. That is the same Isser chaylev, and therefore it is mitzdarif. What about miyad bechaylev and miyad bedam mao? What if it's only the same einish, kodus, but it's two separate isurim?
Yeah.
The first ruling of the Supreme Court, so to speak, they paskin chaylev is mutter, then they retract, and they said dam is mutter. Another miyat did it. And now you want to be mitzvah the miyat of chaylev, the miyat of dam. Can you be mitzvah of that? Perhaps it's one, there's a common thread between the two, because they're both chayiv kodesh on this aveda, so maybe you could be mitzvah of them and be mechayiv bezin to bring a parallel and davar tzibur, and maybe not, because it's two separate asurim. So that's the Gemara. Shaila says the Gemara, miyat bechil mibdam ma'u hocha v'ad kivan the trei surunanu kivan the enes shava loy mitzvah adum kivan the karbanan shava mitzvah the same kapara. The imtim tzlaim kivan the karbanan shava mitzvah. And if you're going to tell me this is also mitzvah, what about miyat bechelev or miyat ba'avodas kechavim? Ma'u. It's not miyat bechelev, miyat b'dam. It's already two separate einshim.
Look at the first words of Mishnah. It's her base in law achas
Mikol mitzvah zamur. Ah.
So these are two different mitzvahs.
Right. So achas mikol. You want to be achas.
Yes.
Achas mikol mitzvah has to be one of mikol mitzvah. Okay. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Shein gesagt, but the Gemara obliges to the take. What about if it's miyad bechel miyad tzchav ma'u hocha vade in asun shava and kabbalah shava? The kapara is also not shava. Or double even the kodesu is the same oynish mitzdarif. Okay, teku. This is a shayla. Iboilu. So the Gemara 2 lines in the bottom of the Gimel Amar Aleph Iboilu. Hayru bezdin shechelev mutter va'osu miyat hakol umeis oisay bezdin va'amad bezdin acher v'chazre v'hayru va'osu miyat acher. Yeah, this case is you have one Sanhedrin Agadol that paskin chelev is mutter and a miyat followed
In one shevet.
You what? Not one Shevet. Sanhedrin Agadol of Klal
That's what
Yisrael.
I'm-
Miyat
Klal
Kol.
Yisrael, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Miyat Kol
yeah.
followed.
Right, okay.
Then that Sanhedrin Agadol dies. Another Sanhedrin takes over, and they paskin the same mistake. They make the same mistake, and they say it's mutter to eat chelev, and a different miyat follows. So now you hear what's going on over here. It's not just that they're two different miyutim. It's not just that they're two different psakim, but it's also that they're two different Sanhedrins. Sanhedrin changed.
Yeah.
Yeah? Different president came in, into power, and they had the authority to change the Supreme Court, let's just say, and now you have a whole different Sanhedrin. That's the shaila. I'll leave it to Bezdin Maisi Loite Boilach. If you say that Bezdin is the one who brings the parallel and Davar Shal Tzibur, Avad is not a shaila. Though less no. Avada, they're not going to bring a parallel and Davar Shal Tzibur because they're two different Sanhedrins. Elokita Boilach, I'll leave it to Tzibur Maisi. Only if you hold that Tzibur is the one who brings the parallel and Davar Shal Tzibur, my Tzibur ha kai. This is the same Tzibur. Oidilma Yediya Dahu Bezdin Dahayru Be'inan. Perhaps, even though the Tzibur is the one who brings it, and you keep him at star of this Tzibur because the Tzibur is the same, right? The Miyat and this Miyat is still, nobody died. They're still the same people. So perhaps that's enough to be Mechayiv then to bring a pound of Tzibur. Oidilma, besides for that, you also need the same Bezdin. And Bezdin died, it was replaced. So perhaps they don't. Teku, that's also a Teku.
That's not, again, the first verse of the Mishnah. It says, V'asu shogel pihem.
Ah,
So the words of the Mishnah
Beautiful.
is
Beautiful. Beautiful. So you want a taina, ayin b'mishnah, and if you take the Mishnah literally, mamish, you medayik in every word, l'chayda,
That's what you're supposed to do.
that you're supposed to do. Okay? For some reason, the Gemara blibes in the Teiku. Tishbi, Yitaretz, Kushis, Ve'aboyis. Doctor, I think you might be Eliyahu Hanavi. Are you? Are you a disguised?
First name.
He's Mataretz, the Gemara's Kasha. Teiku. Says Tishbi, Yitaretz. I have a feeling the doctor might be.
I believe Doctor
What's-
Yicholiyot, right?
Yes, yes.
For sure from the Lamed Vav Tzadikim.
For sure.
I
You
agree.
know what my first name is? Pinchas.
Wow. Pinchas Eliyahu.
Okay.
Ma Tomer. Okay, I'm not crazy. Yeah. Zug the Heilige Gemara, the second line, Gimel Amud Beis. Omer Rabbi Yoel, Meyo sheyoshvu lohiris. 100 dayonim sat down to paskin a shaila. Now, how do you get to 100 dayonim? Sanhedrin HaGodla 70, 71 max. How do you get to 100? So the Achronim speak out that sometimes you get to 100 because the halacha is that if all of Sanhedrin, or they're deliberating about a person is chayev or potter, right? So if a Talmud, you continue.
You add.
Doctor remembers. Continue to add. So Mamela, it's shaykh to have a Sanhedrin HaGodl of 100.
Is there a maximum?
No, you keep adding as much as you need. Maybe there is. I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. Omer Rabbi Yonasan, Mei sheyosh v'lohiris, ein chayovin at sheyedir kulan. Again, this is another caveat when it comes to parallel and davar shel tzibur. It needs to be that every single one of the dayanim agreed to the psak halacha, to the wrong psak halacha that chaylev is mutter. Yashenemar ve'im kol adas Yisrael yishgu, at sheyishgu kulan. Everybody has to make this mistake. At shetiv shel b'chol adas Yisrael. Everywhere in the Torah, by the way, Kiva Eger says in this lashon lav dafka, because it's not always that rubek kulay. But okay, fine. He brings other places in Shas. We don't say that. So the lashon kol Torah kula is lav dafka according to Kiva Eger. But either way, in a majority of Torah we say rubek kulay. V'hochek siv kol adas. Why does the Torah say kol adas? If you have roiv, you always need roiv anyway. So if roiv, you need roiv, and rubek kulay. So kol adas is extra. Why does the Torah say kol adas? Hoil v'kach, from the fact that Torah says kol adas, so you can learn afilu and meya, even if it's 100 dayanim, it's not enough with roiv. You need everybody, every single dayan to agree to that psak. Says the Gemara.
120, huh?
As much as
At
you
least-
have,
at least, yeah.
as many as you have.
180. What do you want?
Sinan, hayru bezdin v'yoda echad men sheto. So now, the doctor used this formula earlier. Gemara is going to take a resort to this formula of going back to the Mishnah, Lashna Mishnah. Let's see. Mishnah says, Nan, hoidu bezdin v'yoda echad men sheto. Talmud v'roi lo yirav v'asa al pm, v'holach v'asa al pm, bein she'asu v'asa imon, bein she'asu v'asa acharein, bein she'lo yasu v'asa reiz chayev, nishloi tola bebezdin. Hi, hu dechayev. This person who knew better, he's chayev, achatas, because he's not considered tola bebezdin. He knew better. Ha'achar, but somebody else who did api bezdin, he's pater. Va'amai, why? Hole nigmir oira. It wasn't complete oira. In other words, Gemara is saying that if Rabbi Yonasan is right, that you need all the dayanim to agree, what about this guy who's sitting as an intern in Bezdin HaGadol? He certainly doesn't agree. And yet, what do you see from here? That only he brings a chatas, but not somebody else. Why? Because somebody else has the heter of Toila Bebezdin. But how does he have heter of Toila Bebezdin if you need every single one of the dayanim to agree? Can't be. Rabbi Yonasan says you need every single dayan to agree to the psak halacha, to have the ptur. And in the Mishnah we have a diak not like that, because the Mishnah says that only the person who knew better, he has to bring a chatas, but somebody else doesn't. But this guy didn't agree to the rest of the Sanhedrin. No, here we're talking about this guy. He knew internally they were wrong. So that's why he can't be Toila Bebezdin, because he knew himself deep down that they're wrong. But outwardly, he was Hirkin Baroshi. He nodded. He said, yeah, I agree. So because he nodded with his head, outwardly, he was intimidated maybe, or whatever it was. Right. So therefore, it's considered Kvar Nigbar Ara Ayidei Kol Dayanim.
That he
that's already considered that all the dayanim agreed. As long as you have an outward approval of this guy,
so
that's already considered
what's
like
he supposed to
like
do?
like everybody agreed.
Well, what is he supposed to do?
Speak up, says the Gemara. Toshama.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mishnah says if Bezdin Paskins, this is a Mishnah later in Davdal Ramad Beis, Bezdin Paskins, and one of them knew that he was Toya, and he spoke up. Taki here he did speak up. He said Toya not them. Hadei Elu Pturin, they're Potter. Time the omerland toyinatem the pturin. It's only because he spoke up. Hashasik mishtek chayovin, even though he didn't agree. V'gamal we consider it as a gemara ira, even though he didn't agree.
Wait, in other words, he spoke up and he says, I don't agree.
Only then he's potter. But if he's quiet and he didn't agree passively, then it's chayet. But why he did stuff he didn't agree.
Like Eo.
Over here, outwardly he did agree. Mosiv Rav Meshashaya, Rav Meshashaya asked on this Shaila, he said, right, we're not allowed to be geyser gzeira tzibur only if Rav Tzibur can withstand the gzeira. How do we know? Right here, he says a goy kulo. It says goy kulo in the pasuk, and ruba kechol dami, and we darshan roives kekoil. So you see, even when the Torah says, when Tanakh it says kol lakol, we also only require roiv and not koil. So how could Rabbi Yoel be medayik in koladas that you need every single dayan to agree? In this case, when the pasuk says a goy kulo, you don't need everybody to agree. It's only even if it's roiv. So tuyofta the Rabbi Yoel and tuyofta it's takakash and Rabbi Yoel. Ve'elomai koladas. So why does the Torah say koladas? If anyways kola Torah kula rubek kuloi, so why do we have to say koladas? Don't say koladas. I already know. Right? Rive is kula. You need rive. So why does it koladas come rachmona? Why do you call koladas? Hachi kamer. I ikulam have yahira. If everybody is present, that's when it's a rav. It doesn't mean that everybody has to agree. It means that everybody has to be present. You need the entire Sanhedrin to be present, and only then can you bring a parallel Davash al Tzibur. All you need is Roiv, but you need all of Sanhedrin to be present.
Wait, so they're not
Omer
always...
Rabbi Yeshua, let me finish the Mishnah. Omer Rabbi Yeshua, Asara sheyoshvim badin, koiler tolu b'tzaver kulan. 10 people who are sitting in a bezdin, and they make a mistake, you split the einish. Everybody has to take responsibility. Koiler tolu b'tzaver kulan. Was pshita, hakamashmalan dafilo talmud f'nei rabbi. Even if one of the yonim is a talmud, but he knows better, and he's toya or he's toya, he also gets punished. He's held accountable, and I guess you can split it up. So the Gemara Ravuna kavanofik levedina ma'isa asura tanol debei Rav lekamei. Ravuna, whenever he went to Paskin and Shaila, he would always bring 10 people with him. You know why? Because he was afraid. What did he say? He said, I'm afraid that if I make a wrong psak, I'm gonna hold the brunt of the entire einish. We had it in Gemara Sanhedrin, right? So this way, I'll have a bunch of dayanim with me, and this will split up the einish. I'll have a little bit of an easier time when there's a consequence. Rav Ashi kavamaiset trefta lakamei. When they brought a treifa to Paskin, treifas hilchas treifas, maisi asora tabacha mimat mechasia. He brought 10 butchers who knew the halachas from Mata Mechasia to Paskin on the Shaila Bekiim Betreifas. And Moisav Kamei Omar, and he said, I want to make sure that everybody, I can split the responsibility between 10.
Another question, if a best in here right now is make a stout in Mamonos, and then the guy was supposed to pay.